What's up, guys? M. Jones back in the house again. Today's list is going to be my top 10 favorite SNL cast members. So if you're not sure what SNL is, it's Saturday Night Live. So I grew up in the early 90s. I was born in the mid-80s, so I never caught on to like parody television until I was probably about 8 years old. So 1993 was probably like the first year I really watched Saturday Night Live. A lot of stuff I didn't get. There's a lot of innuendos, a lot of stuff for an 8-year-old kid not to understand. But my dad and my mom would explain a little bit to me. It was always such an impressionable show to me. I laughed so hard at it with so many different characters. And as I've gotten older, I continue to watch it, but I have not laughed as hard as I used to as a kid. And as an adolescent, so maybe I'm either getting older and it's not as funny to me because it's not as novel, or they're just not that funny anymore. Could be a mix of both. This is such a hard list for me. I didn't want to say anyone from the 70s or 80s because I wasn't even alive. Like if I said Chevy Chase or Gilda Radner or Bill Murray, you'd say, "What do you know about them?" And I'd agree with you. I don't. I mean, I saw clips. My dad showed me clips of them, but I didn't grow up on it. So this is basically from like 1990 to present. So I had 5 honorable mentions. I had such a hard time picking just 10, so I wrote down about 15. Now, if I don't say the person that you like, whether it's a he or a she, if I didn't say them, it's because they didn't do anything for me. There's going to be a lot of names I omit in this list that you're going to probably scratch your head. In my honorable mentions, there's 5 of them. The honorable mentions are Jay Farrell, Leslie Jones, Chris Kattan, Chris Parnell, and Fred Armisen. I love Jay Farrell. I love Jay Farrell's impressions. His impression of Denzel Washington, Will Smith, Jay-Z, Eddie Murphy, Chris Rock, they're untouchable. Kanye West, they're untouchable. They're so funny. And his Denzel is hands down the best one I've ever heard. Hands down. Leslie Jones, she's a current member of Saturday Night Live. She's been on it for about, I think, 3 years now. I remember her first year, she was really rocky, not really good. I remember she made a lot of mistakes, looking at cue cards too much, but now I feel like because of her getting in the movies and how she always hits on Colin Jost on the Weekend Update and how she's so sexual about everything, she's hilarious to me. Like, I really find her funny. My wife loves her too, so we always laugh when we see Leslie Jones. My next one was Chris Kattan. Chris Kattan was back in the 90s. Like, I would say 1995 to about like 99, 2000 era. We'll talk about the 1995 shift too in this video. But Chris Kattan started around 1995, and he always made me laugh as a kid. He did Mr. Peepers. He did Mango. He would do this gibberish talking sergeant in the army. He was hilarious. And he would also do the gibberish act for like as a school teacher, but it was so funny. And no one understood what he was saying. But I really like Chris Kattan. I heard that he wasn't really liked in Saturday Night Live from the other cast members. I heard that from a lot of people. If you go on YouTube, you can listen to different accounts of people from the cast not really liking him too much. My next one would be Chris Parnell. Chris Parnell was really funny to me. Always played the real straight character. Always was the guy that looked like a typical newscaster or, your favorite uncle or someone who does your taxes. Like, he just looked like a typical guy. But he made these funny faces, and he always had like a kind of a wimpy, like, really meek voice, and I would just laugh at everything he would do. He'd always make me laugh. And the last one before we start the list is Fred Armisen. But Fred Armisen made me laugh so hard when he did his Governor David Patterson impression, the governor of New York years ago. I thought that was amazing, and he would do so many different impressions. He always had such an amazing range of talent. And he's also an accomplished musician, so I think that's pretty cool. He can act and play music, so that's very cool. So anyway, here comes the list. It's list time. So, going from 10 to 1. Number 10, Kevin Nealon. Now you're probably wondering, Kevin Nealon? He was on the show for 9 seasons, from 1986 to 1995, but he was typically your weekend update guy. Now, you're probably thinking, what about Colin Quinn? What about Norm Macdonald? What about Seth Meyers? What about Colin Jost? What about Michael Che? Dennis Miller? None of them are on this list. Sorry, none of them. I never thought they were good. I loved Kevin Nealon. I thought he was the best for all the weekend updates. I really understood the word sarcasm because of him, because the news was fake, so how he would say it was so serious but so sarcastically spoken that I kind of understood comedy and wit and how things are portrayed in the comedic world. My number 9, Jason Sudeikis. He was on SNL for 9 seasons, from 2005 to 2013, and he, again, kind of like Chris Parnell, always played like the straight character. Loved it when he would do, I think it was a skit with Kristen Wiig called The A-Holes, and they were so insufferable and so funny, and I just thought that he was so funny. Number 8 is Kate McKinnon. I love Kate McKinnon. She's been on the show since 2012. She's still a current player for SNL. She is so incredibly intelligent, so brilliant as a comedic actress. She makes me laugh. Everything she does, she really makes me laugh. On the show, she's so good. Her Justin Bieber impression's amazing. Her Ellen DeGeneres impression's amazing. She does this skit where she plays she works at a shelter for animals, and she's this cat person, and she's like a lesbian on it. It's so funny how she is as in that skit. But I think Kate McKinnon's absolutely a riot, and my wife the same. But yeah, she's great. My number 7 is Molly Shannon. Molly Shannon was on SNL for 7 seasons, from 1995 to 2001. She was the first comedic actress that was female that I laughed so hard to. I didn't grow up in the times where there's Joan Rivers and Gilda Radners and Jane Curtins. I didn't know them. But I knew Molly Shannon. She was basically the same person. She was the first person I really got to see do comedy as a female, and I would laugh so hard. Her sister, Mary Catherine Gallagher, that skit she did as the Catholic girl that would smell her fingers after she put her hands in her pits, and then she would jump into something and break a table or break a whole bunch of chairs in a row. I would laugh so hard at her. She was so funny. They even made a movie about that character called Superstar. It was okay, but I found her to be so funny on Saturday Night Live. Everything she did, I would laugh. And she was never afraid. She was fearless as a comedic actress to do stuff. Sometimes I feel like they hold back. She was really just gung-ho and cool about doing everything. My number 6 was Dana Carvey. He was on the show for 7 seasons, from 1986 to 1993. I was so flabbergasted and shocked that he looked the way he did when I saw him as Garth in the Wayne's World, the Wayne's World skit with Mike Myers. When I saw him without his white hair and his glasses and how he'd look normally, I was like, oh my gosh! I was like, I would never pick you out in a lineup. I loved him as the church lady. The woman that was just offended by everything and anything that was racy or sexual, she would get so mad at as a talk show host for people to come on. And he was great at that. He was great as Garth. In my opinion, Dana Carvey was kind of the trailblazer for Saturday Night Live. And I say that because the 70s were amazing for Saturday Night Live, and then they really started to stink up. From 1981 to 1985, the seasons were awful. And Dana Carvey got in there in 1986 and really turned things around. So I feel like if that show would have kept going the way it did, it might not have been around after 86 or 87. My number 5, his tag team partner, Mike Myers. He was on the show from 1989 to 1995. I loved when he would be Simon, the little boy in the bathtub, and his accent was hilarious. And obviously Wayne from Wayne's World, he was so funny. I thought him doing Linda Richmond in Coffee Talk was hilarious. I can still see my mom laugh hysterically to that. And I remember when I was a little boy, my dad would work weekends, so I didn't see him a lot. So I would see my mom a lot more. and we would watch SNL and always hope for Linda Richmond's coffee talk, because that was Mike Myers is probably one of his best impressions. What I liked about Mike Myers is he was so into the music acts. If you ever watch the documentary of I Am Chris Farley, Mike Myers talks about how much he loved Chris, but also how much he loved watching the music acts that would come on the show. So he would always be sitting there watching, and as a huge music fan, such as I would love to be on that show just to watch a lot of the music. So I thought that was cool Mike Myers said that and wasn't just talking about himself, bragging. Very humble kind of guy, it seems like. My number 4 was Adam Sandler. He was on the show for 5 seasons from 1991 to 1995. He did the Hanukkah song. That was so funny with Kevin Nealon as the Weekend Update guy. He did that. He did the Lunch Lady song that Chris Farley danced to. I thought he was hilarious as the Harrowly Boy with Chris Farley, and I thought it was hilarious as the Canteen Boy, which was so classic with Alec Baldwin. But just Adam Sandler would make me laugh so hard. He always had that IED, that intermittent explosive disorder, where he would hear one little thing he didn't like and he would just explode. He did that in all his 90s movies. That's why his 90s movies were amazing. Now his movies are awful. He's probably one of the more successful ones out of all the cast members, because if you look at him financially, he's doing pretty well. So he did it right, and he always remembered his friends too. I thought that was cool. A lot of his friends are in his movies. And the thing about Adam Sandler, he was one of the more common guys to really break character and start laughing. Like Chris Farley would make him laugh so hard. You could see that. Rob Schneider would get him to laugh. Mike Myers, I'm sure. A lot of the people from the 90s made him laugh, and he would never be able to keep a straight face. He'd be laughing, which in turn would make us at home laugh too. But I loved Adam Sandler, number 4. My number 3, you might be wondering, oh yeah, I forgot about that guy. My number 3 was Jim Breuer. He was on the show for 3 seasons from 1995 to 1998. Now, I put him on here for many reasons. A, I thought he was hilarious. B, he was one of the newer cast members when that huge crop of members left. So, whenever Mike Myers left, and Kevin Nealon left, and Chris Farley left, and Adam Sandler left, and, a lot of the other guys, like Dana Carvey was just pretty much leaving. Jim Breuer came in there when it was a whole new crop. And it was the Chris Kattan's that we've mentioned, and Will Ferrell, Mark McKinney, all those, Anna Gasteyer, Sherry O'Terry, all of them, Molly Shannon, and I thought he was the funniest one out of all of them. Jim Breuer did the Joe Pesci show, so funny. Goat Boy, pretty funny. He played so many funny characters in that, but he didn't seem to fit in, I guess, with the cast members, or if Lorne Michaels, or just the whole, I guess, the spotlight. I don't think he was into that. I think he had so many more seasons under his belt that he could have done for SNL, but he just he didn't do it, and that's fine. But he did a heavy metal character called Gunnar Olsen. He would be on the Weekend Update with Colin Quinn. It was hilarious, and he would act like a heavy metal guy, just yelling and screaming and stage diving, but he'd tell you about current events. It was so funny. But I love Jim Breuer, and I hated that he got off the show, because he was really, really, really good. My number 2 is Will Ferrell. He was on the show for 7 seasons, from 1995 to 2002. I laughed so hard at Chris Farley. I laughed so hard at Molly Shannon. I laughed really hard at Jim Breuer. But Will Ferrell, I would laugh so hard at the stuff he did, because he looks like your typical dad that probably has a phone clip, probably has, white New Balances, has every tool for barbecuing. He literally is that guy. But he plays that guy perfectly. And he can either play a major a-hole or just such a sucker. And that's mostly his movies. But in SNL, the stuff that he would do was so good. I loved his Alex Trebek, where he played it real straight there. I thought he was so funny in that. I love the one where he is spinning around in his Christmas song commercial, and he's singing, and he starts to get sick, and he starts throwing up everywhere. I laughed so hard at that. And I just thought he was really, really great on the show. And he was kind of the first person that really caught my eye with the new crop of people in 1995, along with Jim Breuer. But he was so funny. He's a really tall guy, so it kind of gave you that Chevy Chase feel. Real normal looking, but very, 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 very goofy and funny. My number 1 would be Chris Farley. I mean, I talked about him in my last video. I'll talk about him again. You know, I'm not going to talk about his movie career, but I'll talk about him on SNL. He paved the way for people that didn't think they were funny or were nervous about comedy to just give it a shot, because he was so negative about himself on how he thought he wasn't funny, but he's literally probably the funniest person that I've ever seen. The Chippendales dance with Patrick Swayze, that's what put him on the map. And the funny thing about that is he was friends with Tom Arnold, Chris Farley was. And he said to Tom Arnold, I don't really want to do this skit. I don't want to take my shirt off. I'm not in good shape. I'm really nervous about doing it. And Tom Arnold persuaded him, you should do it because it's going to be funny because you're a funny guy. And I'm sure it'll work out. Well, it's one of the best SNL skits of all time. It's him and Patrick Swayze as Chippendales trying to be, you know, a Chippendale. And it was amazing. It was so funny. But he did Lunch Ladyland. It was so funny doing that. He was one of the Gap Girls, which was hilarious. And, you know, he just did so many funny things on that show. But I really think my favorite thing that he did on Saturday Night Live was the Chris Farley show. And according to legend, that was actually how he was. He didn't really have to have a cue card. He didn't really have lines. He was that nervous around celebrities. And he had like Paul McCartney on and Martin Scorsese and Jeff Bridges and all these people that were really popular and famous at the time and still are. And he would ask them really dumb questions. And he would say to like Paul McCartney, do you remember the time that you were in the Beatles? And Paul goes, yes, I remember that. And he goes, wow. Like, it was so funny. His reaction was so genuine, so childlike. And I thought that was the best of Chris Farley, when he was his most vulnerable state, being himself. But just love Chris Farley so much on SNL. And, you know, that's it. That's my top 10 with some honorable mentions. Gonna keep doing these. I've been working on a list for music, for top 10 for music. So that'll be in the near future. So hope you enjoyed this list. Take it easy. Okay, bye.